Good morning, guys. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. I want to do something a little bit different this morning because we're going to dive into a really heavy topic. I'm going to be discussing Adolescence, the TV series, as a mom of multiple adolescents. So I wanted to start off with just a little tour of what my morning looks like as I get ready to film here. This also very selfishly allows me to kill two birds with one stone because so many people are asking for day in the life and behind the scenes things. So I'm just going to roll this into one video. Let's take the camera off the tripod here. So I can just kind of show you my space and what's happening in my life this morning. I do my filming, most of it right now, here by my big window. I live in a tiny little apartment as a result of my child wife life burning to the ground, but it's so lovely. I bought this monstera plant, I don't know, at some store. It was on clearance because the base of the pot was broken and it was just one little teeny shoot, and it's such a monster now that it's taken over this whole space. My walls are all covered with budget-friendly antique art. Of course, my little apartment is decorated in Arizona-themed decor. I think that once I edit the audio, you're not going to be able to hear the birds chirping and the dog barking out there, but this is this beautiful little space, and I open up the patio door in the morning and listen to the birds chirping and sit here and do my videos. Kevin put this table at the back of our couch so that we could sit here and watch TV in the evenings, catch up on things while we're eating dinner, which is absolute genius. And I'm just surrounded by lovely little pieces of art. Chloe just bought me this crock last week because my sourdough crock broke, and Kevin filled it with flowers from the 4th Ave street fair for me. From my little recording studio in the corner here, it's then just a hop, skip, and a jump into the kitchen where I have my ice maker going so I can stay cooled off and hydrated with the Berkey and endless snacks. I keep my fridge stocked with sauerkraut and greens and bell peppers, and I'm going to dip in some hummus later. I don't usually have breakfast before I start, but I will take a break halfway through film. So much artwork in my house. We're a family of artists. This is my Arizona monsoon painting that I did. This is maybe my favorite piece of art. I love squirrels. They're my favorite animal. And my stepdaughter, Lainey, did this for me. It's an actual little canvas. And look how tiny it is compared to my finger. I love this. Anyway, I'll take a break at some point and come out here to my little patio, and I'll just sit and watch clouds roll across the sky, listen to the wind in the palm tree. This is always my chair when I'm editing videos and eating a little late morning lunch. It is a beautiful morning, and I have an adolescent of my own asleep down the hallway. It's Birdie's spring break, so here, let's get this puppy back where it belongs. While the birds chirp out there in the pine tree, we're going to dive into the topic of adolescence. Now, I'm going to try to do this the way that they filmed Adolescence in one take, which is really difficult for me because I will often stop, re-record, go back, re-edit, and I don't want to do this today because I thought I'd just kind of see what it's like to just naturally, organically go through my thoughts on this new series. I'm going to stop one time and then we're going to reboot and go for it. Only had to pause because I'm all flustered from giving you a tour. So here we go. Adolescence. I think that it should be required mandatory viewing for every human on the planet, whether you're an adolescent or a parent or an educator or what, because I felt like it painted such a poignantly accurate portrait of life in our society right now. I was listening to the Rich Roll podcast, their Roll-On series, and they were diving into adolescence, and they started right off the bat with something that hit me like a ton of bricks, where they talked about that film technique. If you're not aware, they film the entire series in one take. They start the camera follows the actors, and they move from room to room, from scene to scene in one take. And then they cut and post, which I almost just hit my thing right there to stop, which I'm trying to do right now. And what they said in the Roll-On podcast was so beautiful. They said that it actually made you look at all of the moments in between, because so many of the shows that we watch, You only get that moment that's significant. There's the camera on the actors, they're saying this profound thing, and then it cuts, and you don't see the person walking down the hallway. And in this show, we got the people walking down the hallway. We got the people sitting down at the table, grabbing the coffee cup, closing the bedroom door, opening the bedroom door. We had all those moments in between. And what the Roll On podcast said about that was it really shone a light on how that it was those moments in between that led to the tragic murder of the main character of the show, who we never see because she's already gone by the time this program starts. And to me, they really verbalized what I was feeling as a mom when I was watching this. This isn't a show about knife violence. This isn't a show about crumbling education. A lot of people are talking about public education. This school, from what I've researched in the show, was supposed to be a private school. They have uniforms. It's not just like a slam on pub ed. This isn't just a show that dives into parenting or modern adolescent experiences. There are so many quiet moments that have led to the circumstance in the show. And as a mom, I don't feel like we can point the finger at any one thing that makes my children's lives very different and in many ways worse than my life as an adolescent growing up. It's all of those quiet moments in between when the camera is not focusing on anything in particular. It's just getting you to the next main event that have led to where we are today. Now, I have a really unique experience as a mom in that I raised two batches of kids in very different time zones. If you're new here, I'm turning 51 in just a couple months. As hard as 50 was, 51 just seems so much bigger to me because now I'm officially way over the hill. I'm not just halfway to 100, I'm halfway plus. So I'm turning 51 in a couple of years. In a couple months. And I was born in 1974. I grew up with no computers. When I went to college in 1992, there were two computers in our college library, and we really didn't even know how to use them. I wasn't computer savvy at all. There was no internet when I was a newlywed. We got our first computer, I believe, when I was like 25 years old, and I've only actually had an iPhone for like 10 years. So I grew up in this era before industrialization, before online networking ever began. And my first batch of kids were raised in that same environment. My oldest son was born in 1998. I didn't own a cell phone when he was a baby. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have anything like that. And then I had a big gap in between my first two. I had kind of a time span where then phones and computers and all this interconnectedness started. And my second two have been raised with phones. They've been raised very much online. My almost 22-year-old daughter, who graduated with her culinary arts degree last year, just flew the coop. What's it been? 6 weeks ago? Has it even been that long? I'm not sure. And I can't stop my camera to go check and see. So she just left. And I have a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old stepdaughter, a 16-year-old stepdaughter, and we have everything in between. Kevin and I have 7 kids total. So I raised this first batch of kids completely electronics free. So I have the very unique perspective of having been a mom in the old way of doing things, and then going through the pandemic, seeing everybody get phones, and raising these other 2 kids in a very post-online connectedness era. And watching this show just made me think of the old ways and the new ways, and how this new way is failing our kids in so many ways. But as I watched it, I feel like everyone's kind of looking for a culprit in the show, which then we translate to our modern lives and our society. We're looking for that culprit. My partner, Kev, who you guys all know and love, he is an educator. He's worked in education for, I think he's hitting his 25th year this year. He's the dean of students at a large school and started off as an algebra teacher. He has seen a major shift in children, a major shift in what adolescence is. Sorry, I have a cut in the middle of my thing because my son was calling me from his bedroom. We have seen a major shift as a couple, as an educator and a mom, in what adolescence is, what that experience is, and what the world today is. I remember as a young mom in the early 2000s taking my kids to soccer games, and nobody had iPhones. Sometimes we'd take books and stuff, but the connectedness of the mommy groups, the connectedness of the parents in the 90s was so great. We would sit down and talk to each other while the kids were playing soccer or while they were doing gymnastics. We had eye contact. We had a community in ways that we don't now. Today, if I take my kids to a volleyball practice or gymnastics or anything, then every single mommy there is on their phone. We are completely detached. We have no conversations whatsoever. And watching my kids interact is so tragic. Again, my first batch of kids, their friends would come over, no iPhones. I didn't allow TV, and that's a whole other topic. Maybe it's not another topic. I'm going to throw that in right here. Marie Shriver was on Oprah decades ago, and she was just talking about how her and Arnold parented their kids differently than others. And she said, we have no TV in our home Monday through Friday. That's it, because kids need to focus on school. We need to focus on success. We don't want to just sit down and let the world go by. You only get one chance of life. So we've prohibited TV. So my ex-husband and I sat down with our kids and we had a little Mormon family home evening where we introduced the fact that we were no longer going to watch TV Monday through Friday. They had no access to TV. Occasionally we would watch The Voice or So You Think You Can Dance as a family, but that was very intentional. It was something that cohesively brought us together. We'd pop the popcorn, we'd all sit on the couch together, and we would watch just that and then turn it off. But other than that, Monday through Friday, there was no TV. Friday night, they could watch a movie. Saturday was their only free-for-all day with TV. And I saw this massive shift in my kids when they couldn't just grab the remote and watch SpongeBob whenever they wanted to. When we had no TV, they focused on crafts and riding their bikes and going out and learning how to skateboard. I was also raised in a TV-free home. My parents made us earn TV. We were given half an hour a day. I would always use it to watch one half episode of Wonder Woman or The Bionic Woman, which is maybe why I'm such a crazy feminist today. I would bank hours so that I could watch Little House on the Prairie, which was a new release in the early 80s when I was growing up. But here's how that worked. If we wanted to watch an hour program, we could sit in our little corner library in our family room and we could read books. And it wasn't an even interchange. It was something like an hour of reading to earn 30 minutes of TV. And it was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me. I was a different person than my friend because I was doing real life stuff. I was taking piano lessons. I was going outside. I was doing real stuff. I was interacting with life. And that's how my kids were, and that's how their friends were. Friends would come over with my first batch of kids and actually do things like, hey, do you have an extra bike in your garage? Let's go to the swimming pool. My daughter ran around with this pack of boys. She's this gorgeous little platinum blonde, and all the boys in the neighborhood were always hanging out with my little daughter B. And they, one summer, grabbed shovel, went out into the desert of Arizona, dug themselves a dugout, got a bunch of boards, made a fort. I was always afraid rattlesnakes and scorpions were going to come in, but they loved their dugout fort. Now, my younger batch of kids, their friends come over, and all they do is sit on their phones. I will go into my son's bedroom, and they're all just laying there on their beds with their phones. We have control over my son's phone, so he doesn't always have access to a phone. But that's all that his friends are doing, so it's really hard. So I have observed this cultural shift, and it makes me really sad. Sometimes I think about moving to another country or trying out a different town, different community. But I really fantasize about going back to 1986, 1992. As we watch Adolescents, again, people are focusing on what the culprit is, but I had a different perspective. I trained years ago as a health coach, and as I was taking some of my nutrition classes, I'm a certified nutritionist, and I had to learn all about the Weston Price research and what Johns Hopkins says about this disease and what all these different medical schools have found about nutrition. And one thing really stood out to me. In a lot of disease processes, it's not what you're getting too much of, like too many toxins, environmental exposure to plastics, or too many donuts, too many saturated fats, whatever. It's often what's missing that leads to the disease. For instance, Alzheimer's disease, there is a lot of evidence that shows that certain vitamin deficiencies like your methylcobalamin and methylfolate can be contributors. Low intake of amino acids and omegas can also be contributors. So it's not necessarily that person had this horrible thing happen. It's the what's missing that leads to a lot of diseases. And as I watch adolescents, all I can think as a mom is what's missing. What's missing from the character's life on the show and what's missing from our world today. And I think that the answer to this, as a mom who's raised kids both ways, is really clear. And I can sum it up as a breakdown of our very key, crucial human tribalism. Gabor Mate talks about this extensively. He talks about how that children are supposed to be part of multi-generational interconnected tribes. And that way they learn from mentors who are wiser and actually know what they're doing. And what we've done in our industrialized, capitalistic, nuclear family societies, especially in the United States where I live, is it's all mom and dad and then phones on computers. So the kids are all interconnecting with each other and they are not connected anymore to their adult mentors. Our grandparents are completely missing in action. There's so much research about absentee grandparentism in the boomer generation, and that is contributing greatly to that tribal breakdown. There are so many things that are contributing to tribal decay and collapse. So as the kids just learn from each other, they're not learning real skill. They're on TikTok learning stuff that's not real, that isn't helpful, and that doesn't lead to healthy lives. For myself, I grew up in a generation where my grandparents were very active. And when I had problems with my mom or my dad, which adolescents do, I had those other trusted mentors to turn to. But also, despite my problematic childhood and parents that were less than ideal, I was very much connected to my parents. I trusted them. They were adults. I didn't have TikTok or Google or Snapchat or anyone else to turn to. So I relied spontaneously on my parents for answers to things. My kids today, they don't trust me because everything on the internet and all of their other friends completely discredit me. So as an example, when my oldest daughter had my little grandbaby, I would give her parenting advice and then she'd Google it and say, actually, Google says that this type of baby bath stuff has some toxins in it that you shouldn't be using, so I'm going to use this instead. And as a parent, as an older mentor in the tribe, I have no purpose for my kids. They don't trust me. They can Google and fact check almost anything that I say. My son recently was having a conversation with me about public school and the need for education and how that children actually learn better through a Montessori approach and through experiential learning. And so we shouldn't even have high school. It's all just complete bonk. So he wants to just online and, I don't know, learn something spontaneously. And after Googling and going down that rabbit hole, it's really hard for me to get that out of his head. We, as adult mentors in the tribes, no longer have the influence over our kids. If you look at adolescence and at our own lives from that standpoint, not who the culprit is, school or the dad or the other kids that were bullying him or iPhones or knives or whatever, if you just look at it from the standpoint of what's missing, our tribes, intergenerational connectedness, support for parents. I think that that's absolutely everything. My kids are being raised completely without grandparents. My first year kids had a huge family. They had great grandparents. They had aunts and uncles who some of them are still deceased. My Mormon family ghosted me, blocked me, disowned me. I'm cut out from the will and I'm no longer allowed to contact them again because I am an evil satanic ex-Mormon. So for 7 years, my kids have just had me in Kev. That's it. And that's a lot of pressure. And other people feel that just because they've relocated for work across the country or parents are off vacationing because the boomer grandparents are enjoying their lives instead of grandparenting. I was coughing and had to get a glass of water. This is so hard, but I'm not going to do any post edit or cutting or rearranging anything. Let me know what you guys think about this. One final thought that I have is the conversation around cell phones, because I think that it is important. And if there is a culprit, it is that. I think that we are giving our kids Ferraris when they don't even know how to ride a bike, and we're just like, "Here you go," and then we're wondering why they crash. As a mom, I had some terrible things come into my children's lives through their cell phones, and because they didn't have that tight connection to us, they were talking to their friends about it, but we weren't aware of it, and they were doing a really good job of scrubbing stuff from their phone. So we have Bark on our phones. We also have controls in our iPhone where my son doesn't have access to his phone until he gets home from school in the afternoon. If he wants to call his girlfriend and arrange transportation in the morning, then he has to come into my bedroom and use my phone, which we use as a family phone. And that's something that I very much appreciate about my childhood growing up. Again, I grew up without iPhones. We had a phone on the wall in the kitchen. And if I was talking to my boyfriend, it had a cord. I didn't even have cordless. I had that kind of phone. I had to stand there in the kitchen talking to my boyfriend. There was not a lot that I could say. Standing in the kitchen with 4 brothers and sisters and my mom and dad and like grandma and the neighbor kids talking to my boyfriend. We also had phone hours. If it was dinner time, my mom took the phone off the hook. If a boy called after, I don't know, like 8 o'clock at night, I wasn't allowed to talk. If they called first thing in the morning, I wasn't allowed to talk. We had very scheduled, very structured time. And honestly, I miss those days. I miss the fact that if I left home, people knew that they couldn't reach me. I think my mom would go to the grocery store just to escape the kids because they knew that we couldn't call her. Sometimes we did call her at the grocery store, though. That's its own funny thing. I should do a whole video about growing up in the 70s and what that was like. We could track them down. You'd have to find their hotel if they were out of town and have your grandma like put in the long distance stuff so that you could reach your parents while they were on vacation. But I miss those days that I could leave home and just be away and know that like I could come home later and check my voicemail and people would leave me messages. But if I was on a picnic, on a camping trip, on a walk, I was unreachable and I could just be by myself. Our kids are being raised in a time where they are constantly reachable. They have these Snapchat threads that go on all day, every day. I put the kibosh on that as a mom last summer, and it's the best thing that I could have ever done for my children. The best thing ever. My little Chloe, my almost 22-year-old, she has a little box by the door of her bedroom that says phone. She drops her phone in there. She doesn't have her phone on her most of the time so that she can just be unreachable and have her own thoughts inside of her own head. I don't understand letting our kids just be on their phones 24/7. My son gets 3 hours a day. He only gets, I think, 45 minutes of Snapchat a day, 45 minutes of TikTok. He does get free use of his texting in the evening. But again, we don't encourage him to have his phone in his pocket. And if we're having dinner or if friends are over, the phones go away. And people are just being people. They're just connecting with one another. I don't understand why this young generation of parents thinks that it's okay for kids to just have unlimited use of phones. I never did. My parents never did. My grandparents never did. We need to unplug our kids and let them plug back in. For several years, I was a foster mom. We had a child for almost 5 years who then was adopted by my sister-in-law and is now my children's cousin. And during some of our foster training parenting classes, actually, this was with a psychologist that we were working with, we learned about the tether method, where if you have children who are detached and they have any type of attachment disorder, either from environmental like things that they've been through or maybe some psychological things that prevent them from attaching correctly. This tether method was where you have your children be with you all the time, just and all the things that you're doing. So my little 2-year-old turning 3-year-old, as soon as he could walk, he had a lot of detachment. He definitely struggled with some attachment disorders, which made it difficult to connect with him and have him trust and bond with us. So this tether method meant that if I was in the kitchen unloading the dishwasher, I would bring our little guy in the kitchen with me and I would put him on the stool and have him just unload the silverware. Because humans bond through side-by-side cooperative projects, through work, through harvesting, through hiking, through planting, through, I don't know, millions of years ago, what we were doing. But we bond through working side by side. And we now live in a time where our children aren't expected to do any work, and they're on their phones, they're off with their friends, so they're not bonding with us. When my son was going through a really tough time after my divorce, then I immediately leaned into this tether method training and just started making sure that he was bonding with me and with Kev and with his sister. So this morning I'm going to go to Trader Joe's and I'm filming videos first because I'm just going to have Brody put his tennis shoes on and walk over there with me. Not because I need Brody at Trader Joe's, but because that's how humans bond. This tether method, honestly, is what I always turn to if I have any problems with my kids. And it is just so simple. Like, hey, Brody, I have this huge pile of towels to fold. Can you come help me? I don't need his help, but we need each other. We as humans need to connect more. And then on the flip side, I do things with him. So it's not just all about making them do stuff with you, but so for my little guy, if I saw him playing Legos, then sitting down for 10 minutes and, hey, can mommy play Legos with you? Or if he was out on the swings, hey, can mommy sit on the swing next to you? That's how we bond with one another. And we need that very much. The answer to all of everything in the world right now, in my opinion, is to rebuild our tribes. We have been disconnected by capitalistic greed and by electronics, even the way that we live in our neighborhoods. This isn't healthy for humans. This is healthy for the Wall Street people, the builders, the people that hold our mortgages. We were put into these little suburbs with non extended families. The nuclear family was created in America for profit. And what we've lost is our sanity. We've lost our connections, and our children are the canaries in the coal mines. Let's listen to what's happening to them and correct it. I want to put this on pause for a minute and regroup my thoughts, but I'm not going to. We're going to see how this goes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think I want to conclude with just the thought that every day as a mom, I do operate on kind of like a heartbrokenness that this is the world that I'm raising my children in. And I did not feel like that in 1999, 2002, 2006. I didn't feel like that until cell phones and consumerism and then the pandemic, TikTok, Snapchat took over my children's world. And even if I keep my kids out of that, it doesn't change everything because everybody else out there is letting their kids just have a willy-nilly free time with phones. Don't have children that you can't parent. Don't have children if you can't grandparent. And don't start a little tribe if you're not going to see that thing through, and make sure that you are intentionally focused on your tribe. That's it. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, guys.